The Bible and Archaeology, the Great Civilizations of the Past. Part 1, Mesopotamia. Introduction. Welcome to this documentary where we will explore the relationship between biblical texts and some surprising archaeological discoveries made in ancient Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. From Ur of the Chaldeans, recognized as the birthplace of Haran, Abraham's brother, and possibly of Abraham himself, to the great empires of Assyria and Babylon, we will discover how the remnants of these cultures help us contextualize biblical narratives. We will delve into the historical landscapes that shaped the stories of Genesis and beyond. For many centuries, ancient Mesopotamia remained hidden from the eyes of the Western world. Only through classical authors and Old Testament texts were fragments of some of the peoples who inhabited it preserved, sparking in some serious doubts about their actual existence. Others, like the Sumerians, were lost from our memory until archaeological excavations starting in the 19th century brought them back into history. Thanks to these archaeological findings and biblical accounts, today we have a more complete understanding of what life was like in biblical times, allowing us to step into their homes, learn about their social activities, and see how cities were organized. A journey into our past, to our roots, to the roots of humanity. Stay until the end, and if you find this journey enjoyable, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Chapter 1. The Bible and the City of Ur. Ur of Chaldea at the beginning of the 2nd millennium BC was a powerful, rich, and magnificent capital. The archaeological excavations conducted by British archaeologist Charles Leonard Woolley, driven by the University of Pennsylvania in collaboration with the British Museum in London, brought the biblical city of Ur in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq, to light in 1927. These excavations throughout the 20th century have shed light on life in these cities, allowing us to connect biblical stories with real history. Ur, usually associated with the archaeological site of Al-Muqayyar, is located west of the current course of the Euphrates River, approximately 240 kilometers southeast of Babylon. The ruins of this city cover an area of about 730 by 910 meters. At its peak, Ur was a center for the worship of the lunar god Nannar, later known as Sin. One of the most prominent structures of the city was its ziggurat, a temple tower measuring approximately 61 meters long, 46 meters wide, and 21 meters high. The city of Ur and the origin of Abraham. We begin our exploration with one of the most important figures in the Bible, Abraham, the patriarch. In Genesis 11:31, the Bible tells us the following. Terah then took Abram his son and Lot his grandson, the son of Haran, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, the wife of Abram his son, and they went with him out of Ur of the Chaldeans, to go to the land of Canaan. In time they came to Haran and began dwelling there. What do we know about Ur? And what does archaeology reveal about this city? Ur was one of the most prosperous cities of the ancient world, a key city in Sumerian civilization. Excavations in Ur by Sir Leonard Woolley uncovered impressive monuments such as the Great Ziggurat, as well as royal tombs that speak to the luxury and wealth of the city's elite. The royal tombs of Ur. The royal tombs, which appear to date from around 2700 BCE, contained gold, silver, lapis lazuli jewelry, and finely crafted items. Sir Woolley also discovered clay tablets describing daily life in Ur, revealing an advanced society with a rich cultural and religious life. These discoveries allow us to imagine what Abraham's life might have been like before his departure to Canaan and his stay in Haran. In just 3 months in 1927, Sir Woolley excavated no fewer than 600 tombs, some with rich burial goods, which naturally shaped the direction of the work. By 1934, a total of over 2,100 burials had been brought to light. Woolley estimated that the original necropolis, partially destroyed and looted, likely contained double or triple that number. Some of the burials excavated by 1929, termed royal tombs by Woolley, immediately captured the public's attention. These were 16 tombs, distinguished from the others by the fact that the burial was not done in a simple coffin or on a mat, but consisted of a stone or brick burial chamber and a room that housed the remains of 6 to as many as 70 or 80 people. The most important of these, according to Woolley's reconstruction, lay in the burial chamber along with a small number of attendants. The rest of the bodies were placed in an adjoining pit, possibly open air, clearly arranged in a ritual manner following a ceremony described by the archaeologist as follows. Imagine the burial chamber already occupied and its door sealed, while the pit remained open, its floor and walls covered with mats, still empty. Then a procession of people descended the access ramp. Members of the court, soldiers, servants, women adorned in brightly colored garments and headdresses of lapis lazuli, silver, and gold, and with them musicians carrying harps or lyres, cymbals, and sistrums. They all stood at the back of the chamber, while other servants led in carts drawn by oxen and donkeys, guiding them backward down the ramp, then remaining in the pit as well. Each man and woman held a small cup of clay, stone, or metal, the only object needed for the ritual to follow. As some sort of ceremony took place, it is clear that the musicians were playing until the end. Everyone drank from their cup and positioned themselves to meet death. Next, someone descended and sacrificed the animals, perhaps arranging the drugged bodies properly, and then earth was thrown in from above until the pit was filled. In the 1928-1929 campaign, he also made a discovery that stirred even more interest among his contemporaries. During a dig beneath the levels of the tombs, he found a thick layer of clay sediment. Woolley immediately associated this layer with a major flood that he speculated might be the one described in the Bible. The tomb PG 800 was occupied by a woman bearing a lapis lazuli seal, the inscription on which has identified her as Queen Pu-Abum. There has been debate over whether the title on her seal, NIN, referred to her role as queen or as high priestess of the god Nana. Her tomb was preserved almost intact and consisted of a large pit accessed by a ramp on which lay the bodies of 5 men armed with daggers. At the end of the ramp, at the entrance to a large chamber, were found the remains of a cart or sled along with the bones of 2 oxen and 4 men. The bodies of other men were scattered throughout the chamber, which branched off to the right and left of the ramp. At the southern end of this chamber, the bodies of 10 women were carefully arranged in 2 rows, richly adorned and accompanied by musical instruments, houses in ancient Ur of the Chaldeans. These houses, estimated to date roughly between the 20th and 16th centuries BCE, featured an elaborate design and were built from mud bricks, a common material in the region due to the lack of stone. These private dwellings reflected a high level of organization and attention to construction. Over 4,000 years ago in Ur, people lived in massive villa-style buildings, almost all of which were 2 stories high, with 12 to 14 rooms. The ground floor was solidly built with fired bricks, while the second story used mud bricks. The walls were neatly plastered with mortar and whitewashed. Visitors would enter through a door into a small atrium with water basins for washing hands and feet. From there, they would enter a spacious, bright central courtyard with a beautifully paved floor. Surrounding this courtyard were the reception area, kitchen, and various rooms, along with a private altar. A stone staircase, beneath which was a small lavatory, led to the upper floor, where the family rooms and guest quarters were located. Amidst the ruined walls, everything belonging to the life of these patriarchal houses was brought back to light. Numerous collections of vessels, amphorae, cups, and clay tablets inscribed with writing formed a mosaic through which the daily life in Ur could be reconstructed piece by piece. The rooms in these houses were generally arranged around a central paved courtyard, which served as the hub of family life and allowed for natural light and ventilation. Around this courtyard were various rooms, usually between 13 and 14, serving as bedrooms, living rooms, kitchens, and storage areas. The inner walls were plastered and whitewashed, providing a cleaner finish and protecting the mud brick structures. The layout typically included 2 stories in wealthier households, with main rooms on the upper floor and service areas on the ground floor. Access to the upper floors was through internal staircases. The houses also had small windows to limit heat and provide some privacy. These urban homes reveal a relatively comfortable lifestyle for the people of Ur, who had access to cultural advances such as cuneiform writing and mathematical education. According to the tablets found at the site, it has been possible to identify complex mathematical operations, such as square and cube roots. While there is no direct evidence of Abraham in Ur, the archaeological findings allow us to understand the cultural background of the biblical narrative. Ur was a religious and commercial center, and its population worshipped gods such as Nanar, the moon god. This is significant because it helps us comprehend the radical shift represented by God's call for Abraham to leave this prosperous, polytheistic city for a new land. It also leads us to reflect on the fact that, despite living under the influence of a polytheistic society, Abraham developed a religious consciousness so profound that he is now recognized as the founder of the great monotheistic religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. According to biblical chronology, Abraham was born in the year 2018 BCE. Sometime before, around 2030 BCE, based on available historical data, Sumerian civilization was nearing its end. An Elamite army took advantage of the anarchy in Mesopotamia and a period of famine in Ur to break through the city's proud defenses and occupy it in 2006 BCE, taking the last king of the third dynasty, Ibbi-Sin, as a prisoner. Even before this event, since the time of Sargon of Akkad, Sumerian culture had been heavily influenced by the Semitic Akkadians. This fact intriguingly aligns with the biblical account, as Abraham, it is known, was not Sumerian, but a descendant of Shem, through Arpachshad, son of Shem, son of Noah. Chapter 2: Mesopotamia, the Bible, and the Flood. The Bible also repeatedly mentions other great civilizations of Mesopotamia, and several Genesis narratives were known among Mesopotamian populations. The Great Flood. One of the most fascinating accounts in Genesis is that of the Great Flood. However, a similar story existed in Mesopotamian culture, the flood myth in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Discovered on tablets in the city of Nineveh, the Sumerian story of Gilgamesh recounts how the gods decided to flood the earth, but a man named Utnapishtim was warned to build an ark and save his family and animals. Samuel Noah Kramer, in his book History Begins at Sumer, translates the ancient Sumerian tablets written in cuneiform. Among them is the poem of Ziusudra, the oldest version of the flood story found in Mesopotamia, dating back to approximately the 3rd millennium BCE. Ziusudra was a pious king, fearful of the gods, always attentive to revelations conveyed through dreams and enchantments. It seems Ziusudra was standing before a wall when a divine voice informed him that the assembly of the gods had decided to bring about a flood and destroy the seed of humankind. Unfortunately, the cuneiform inscription on the tablet breaks off due to deterioration, but it likely continued with detailed instructions given by the god to Ziusudra. The latter would build a massive vessel, which would allow him to save his life. The story then recounts how the waters of the flood submerged the earth, unleashing with force unceasingly for 7 days and 7 nights. After this, the sun god Utu reappears, once again granting his precious light. Ziusudra prostrates himself before him and offers sacrifices. We have a very similar story in the tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, a later Akkadian text from the 2nd millennium BCE, we also find the flood narrative. Here, the flood hero is Utnapishtim, who resembles Ziusudra but belongs to a Babylonian tradition. The tablets of the Epic of Gilgamesh have been mainly unearthed through various archaeological excavations at ancient Mesopotamian sites. The most important find was in the ancient city of Nineveh, located in present-day northern Iraq, within the library of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. Similar tablets have also been discovered in Sippar, north of Babylon, Hattusa, modern Turkey, Ur, in southern Mesopotamia, Babylon, and Mari, in northern Mesopotamia. The hero of the epic is Gilgamesh, king of Uruk. Known for his heroic bravery and remarkable deeds, Gilgamesh has even been called the Sumerian Hercules. In fact, his legend, which became highly popular in later centuries and likely spread throughout the ancient world, may have influenced Greek myths about Hercules and some incidents in the Odyssey. In summary, the story unfolds as follows. When Gilgamesh's close friend died, the hero decided to evade such a fate and embarked on a quest for the secret of eternal life. After a long and eventful journey, he found Utnapishtim, who, following divine instruction, had built a great boat that saved him and his family during the time of the flood. After surviving the flood, Utnapishtim made a sacrifice that pleased the gods. Not only had Utnapishtim survived the flood, but he was also granted the gift of eternal life. He directed Gilgamesh to a certain magical plant that would permanently restore his youth if eaten. Gilgamesh found the plant, but before he could consume it, a serpent stole it from him, and thus he was denied eternal life. This incident reminds us of the serpent that deceived Adam and Eve, depriving them of eternal life. The similarities between these accounts are astounding. Although the biblical narrative has significant differences, the fact that versions of a flood story existed in Mesopotamia suggests that this event had a profound impact on the memory of ancient populations in the Near East. Today, we have different versions of the same historical event, transmitted by cultures that often shared the story orally from generation to generation, possibly distorting it over time. However, the Hebrew people had the valuable practice of keeping a written historical record of the most significant events they experienced. If you would like more information about the biblical account of Noah's flood, you can visit our YouTube channel Mankind Roots to watch the video, The Disappearance of the First Civilization. You'll find answers to questions such as, where did the waters of the flood come from? If they truly covered the whole earth, where did they go afterward? Are there geological evidences on Earth for the biblical flood? The Tower of Babel. The Bible first references the city of Babel in Genesis 10:9, where it states that Noah's great-grandson through Ham, Nimrod, founded the city along with other significant Mesopotamian cities. As noted in the biblical text, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. This is the Bible's earliest mention of city building in the book of Genesis. Remarkably, this aligns with archaeological findings identifying this same region as the cradle of civilization. The Bible locates the story of the Tower of Babel in this same Mesopotamian region. Genesis 11:1-9 describes humanity uniting to build a great tower on the plain of Shinar, until God intervenes, confuses their languages, and scatters them across the earth. This story has been widely accepted throughout history, as attested by the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus in the 1st century CE. In his work Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 4, he recounts the story of Nimrod and how he encouraged the people to challenge God by building a tower reaching the heavens. Josephus described it as follows. Nimrod was the one who incited them to such affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, son of Noah, a brave man of great physical strength. He persuaded them not to attribute their prosperity to God, but to believe it was by their own merits. Gradually, he transformed governance into tyranny, seeing no other way to turn people away from their reverence for God than to put them in constant fear of his own power. He also told them that they would avenge themselves on God if he attempted to flood the earth again, and that they would build a tower too high for the waters to reach. thus avenging the destruction of their ancestors. Can Mesopotamian constructions be linked to the Tower of Babel story? The most famous ziggurat is that of Babylon, known as Etemenanke, dedicated to the god Marduk, who, according to some, was Nimrod, the founder of ancient Babel, later deified. Its monumental structure resembles architectural features common to many ancient civilizations and strikingly parallels the biblical account of Babel. These ancient monuments support the Genesis 11:3-4 account, describing the building techniques for the Tower of Babel. Then they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them with fire." So they used bricks instead of stone and bitumen as mortar. They now said, "Come, let us build a city for ourselves and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a celebrated name for ourselves, so that we will not be scattered over the entire face of the earth." The same method was used to construct the step pyramids discovered in Mesopotamia, especially in the plain of Shinar. Since stone was scarce in the region, the practical solution was to bake bricks. Remnants of this event echo through stories from other civilizations. The story of Babel, with its themes of human ambition, divine intervention, and linguistic fragmentation, finds surprising resonance across various mythologies, suggesting a shared cultural memory or widespread motif reflecting humanity's yearning for unity and the consequences of overreach. The Sumerian tale of Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta. In the Sumerian myth of Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, King Enmerkar, who founded Uruk, biblical Eric, appeals to the gods to restore a single language so all nations can communicate without language barriers. While the tale does not mention a monumental structure, it echoes the longing for a unified language, reminiscent of the biblical theme in Genesis 11:1, where now all the earth continued to be of one language and of one set of words. The alignment of these stories in both timeline and geographical proximity to the biblical Babel hints at shared concerns within the region regarding language and unity. The Aztec myth of Cholula's pyramid. In Aztec mythology, a giant named Zelhua, one of the flood survivors, builds a massive pyramid in Cholula to reach the heavens in honor of Tlaloc, the god of rain. However, the gods, angered by this ambition, send down fire to halt construction and scatter the builders. Although this tale lacks the element of linguistic confusion, it shares the theme of divine punishment for humanity's attempt to ascend to the heavens, similar to the fate of Babel. The Greco-Roman tale of the giants and Olympus. Greek mythology tells of the giants, led by Alcyoneus, who attempt to reach Olympus by piling mountains atop each other, aiming to dethrone the gods. In retaliation, Zeus defeats and scatters them. This story emphasizes divine retribution for mortal hubris and the quest to reach divine realms, aligning closely with the themes of Babel. The Tibetan legend of the Six Brothers. In a Tibetan tale, 6 brothers endeavor to build a tower to reach heaven. As it rises, the gods confuse their language, causing miscommunication and ultimately halting the construction. This story mirrors Babel closely, particularly in the aspect of divine intervention through linguistic confusion, which prevents the tower's completion and disperses the builders. Distinctive Hebrew perspective on Babel and other cultural legends. The biblical account of Babel diverges in one important respect: its framing within Hebrew monotheism. Unlike neighboring cultures, the Hebrew tradition often expressed strong opposition to pagan practices, particularly the worship of other deities and the construction of temples for foreign gods. Furthermore, the Hebrews maintained rigorous standards for their historical records, often preserving them with scrupulous care. This distinction challenges the idea that the Babel story was simply borrowed or inspired by surrounding cultures. The idea of a proto-human language or mother tongue is fascinating, but it remains highly speculative and full of challenges. Although theories suggest the existence of an original language from which all other languages derived, modern studies have not been able to confirm its existence with certainty. The evolution of languages is a complex process, and it is believed that, if there was a common language, it would have fragmented thousands of years ago, making its reconstruction extremely difficult. However, the search for a proto-language offers an interesting window into understanding the origins of language and human communication. In this regard, it is appropriate to quote the new Encyclopedia Britannica. The oldest examples of written language, the only linguistic fossils we will ever have access to, date back at most 4,000 or 5,000 years. And where did archaeologists discover these linguistic fossils? In Lower Mesopotamia, where ancient Shinar was located, where, according to the biblical account, the Tower of Babel was built. So, the only available evidence aligns with what is presented in the Bible. Chapter 3. The Bible and the Assyrian Empire. As we move forward through the later centuries, the mighty Assyrian Empire becomes one of the dominant forces in the region. This empire not only appears in historical records, but also plays a crucial role in biblical accounts. The first mention we find in the Bible of the Assyrians can be related to what Genesis 10:22 states: "The sons of Shem, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram." As we can see, among the sons of Shem, Noah's son, there is a certain Ashur. What does this figure have to do with the Assyrians? In ancient Assyria, many kings bore the name of the national god Ashur, or Ashur, which reflected the importance of this god in Assyrian religion and culture. Ashur was the supreme god of the Assyrians, associated with war, kingship, and the protection of the empire. Including his name in a king's title was a way of claiming Ashur's divine backing over his reign and the power of the nation. Throughout the empire's history, many rulers included the name of their deified ancestor and founder, such as Ashur-nasir-pal II and Ashurbanipal. The use of Ashur in Assyrian kings' names reflected their direct connection with the supreme god of the nation, who represented the power and destiny of the empire. Including his name was a way of emphasizing the king's divine character, often interpreted as Ashur has given, Ashur protects, or Ashur reigns. This reinforced the idea that the king was a representative of Ashur on earth, and that his victories and territorial expansions were supported by the divine will of the god. With the expansion of Christianity, a syncretism occurred by which Assur became the Assyrian name for Christ, and the solar disk with which he is represented became the shield of Christian Assyrians, which has been seen carried by Assyrian militiamen during the Syrian civil war. In the context of the Assyrian Empire, where war, expansion, and devotion to the national god were key components of state identity, using theonyms in royal names reinforced the king's legitimacy and Assyria's destiny as a global power. Among ancient peoples, it was common to elevate ancestors to the status of deities, and the case of Assur is no exception. Originally considered the eponymous ancestor of the Assyrians, Assur was deified, transitioning from an ancestral figure to the supreme god of the nation. This process of divinization reflects the cultural and spiritual importance the Assyrians attributed to their origins, embodying in their god Assur the ideals of power, protection, and supremacy. After the flood, in a time when humanity began to repopulate from Noah's descendants, Assur, who according to the biblical account was Noah's grandson, played a decisive role in founding the Assyrian Empire. His Semitic ancestry and his prominent place in the reconstruction of post-Diluvian civilizations positioned him as a leader not only in historical terms but also in spiritual ones. Over time, Assur became the tutelary deity of Assyria, revered as the protector and guarantor of the empire, uniting the ancestral with the divine in Assyrian worship. This deification process solidified the national and religious identity of the Assyrians, who considered their god Assur as the manifestation of celestial order and power, legitimizing their conquests and empire. This phenomenon of ancestral deification is not unique to the Assyrians, as it is observed in other Near Eastern civilizations and beyond, where historical figures were transformed into gods as a way to integrate religion with politics and collective memory. The Assyrians and the destruction of Samaria. In 2 Kings 17:5-6, we find the following account. The king of Assyria invaded the entire land, and he came to Samaria and laid siege to it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. He then led the people of Israel into exile in Assyria and made them dwell in Hala and in Habor at the river Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. This biblical account describes the conquest of Samaria, the capital of the kingdom of Israel, by the Assyrians. This event, which took place in 722 BCE, 740 BCE, according to the biblical chronology, under the reign of Shalmaneser V, is well documented in Assyrian records. In the inscriptions of the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser III, it is also mentioned how he deported the Israelite elites and repopulated the region with people from other parts of the empire. The text of Sargon II's inscription mentioning the conquest of Samaria is found in the Annals of Sargon II and other cuneiform inscriptions from his reign. This text describes how, after Shalmaneser V's death, Sargon II completed the conquest of Samaria and deported many of its inhabitants. Below is an important excerpt from these inscriptions. Excerpt from Sargon II's inscription. I took the city of Samaria by storm and exiled 27,290 of its inhabitants. I took them as spoils along with their chariots and the gods in whom they trusted. I placed Assyrian officials there and brought people from other lands I conquered to settle in Samaria. This inscription reflects how Sargon II, after taking control of Assyria following Shalmaneser V's death, completed the siege of Samaria in 722 BCE, 740 BCE, according to biblical chronology. The king deported a large portion of Israel's population and resettled peoples from other regions under Assyrian rule in their place, a common strategy in Assyria's imperial control tactics. The inscriptions detailing this and other campaigns of Sargon II have been found on various monuments, stelae, and tablets. These inscriptions not only document the capture of Samaria, but also other significant military campaigns that contributed to the expansion of the Assyrian Empire. Archaeological evidence fully supports the biblical account of Samaria's conquest and the exile of its inhabitants. The Assyrians were known for their brutal tactics of mass deportation, a practice well documented both in biblical texts and Assyrian records. Chapter 4: The Bible and the Fall of Jerusalem. At the end of the 6th century BCE, the collapse of the kingdom of Judah and the Babylonian exile occurred, a critical period in biblical history. Babylon, under the command of Nebuchadnezzar II, conquered Jerusalem in 587 BCE, 607 BCE, according to biblical chronology, destroying Solomon's temple and deporting the Jews to Babylon. The Bible describes it in 2 Kings 25:1. In the 9th year of Zedekiah's reign, in the 10th month, on the 10th day of the month, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came with all his army against Jerusalem. He camped against it and built a siege wall all around it. And later, in 2 Kings 25:4-7, the city wall was broken through, and all the soldiers fled by night through the gate between the double wall near the king's garden, while the Chaldeans were surrounding the city, and the king went by the way of the Arabah. But the Chaldean army pursued the king, and they overtook him in the desert plains of Jericho, and all his troops were scattered from his side. Then they seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah, and they passed sentence on him. They slaughtered Zedekiah's sons before his eyes. Then Nebuchadnezzar blinded Zedekiah's eyes, bound him with copper fetters, and brought him to Babylon. In this brutal and merciless way, Nebuchadnezzar II punished King Zedekiah's act of betrayal. The last thing Zedekiah saw before being blinded was the execution of his young sons. In the 6th century BCE, the kingdom of Judah was in a critical situation, caught between powers like Egypt and Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon had tried to maintain control over Jerusalem through treaties and vassalage, but constant rebellions and alliances with Egypt led to the city's final destruction. In 587–586 BCE, 607 BCE, according to biblical chronology, after a lengthy siege lasting about 18 months, the Babylonian army broke through Jerusalem's walls. The accounts of this destruction, recorded in the Bible and supported by archaeological sources, describe how Solomon's temple, the spiritual and cultural center of the Hebrew people, was burned down and reduced to rubble. This event marked not only the physical devastation of Jerusalem, but also a fracture in the identity and faith of the Jewish people. The scenes were devastating. The Babylonian armies broke into the city, looted treasures, murdered many, and deported a large portion of the elite and population to Babylon in what is known as the Babylonian exile. It is estimated that thousands of Hebrews were taken in long caravans to Babylon, crossing the Syrian desert under extremely harsh conditions. A recent and unprecedented detail emerging from research is the selective deportation. The Babylonians did not simply take common prisoners, they carefully selected the elite, artisans, religious leaders, and nobles. This is confirmed in the biblical book of Daniel, where Daniel himself was part of the Jewish elite of the time. It is believed that this was a strategy to dismantle the government system and stifle any future rebellion. Additionally, the Babylonians brought in foreign settlers to inhabit the lands of Judah, changing the social composition of the region. In Babylon, the exiled Jews lived in settlements like Tel Aviv, on the banks of the Kebar River. Although they were under surveillance, they had some autonomy. The Jewish community reorganized around the scriptures and oral tradition, developing a religious life without the temple. It is during this period that prophets like Ezekiel and Jeremiah offered comfort and hope, envisioning the return to the promised land. Psalm 137, which expresses the pain of the exiles, "By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion," encapsulates the profound sadness of the Hebrew diaspora. This episode was depicted by Giuseppe Verdi in his opera Nabucco, with the magnificent chorus singing Va Pensiero. However, during the exile, the Jewish people also experienced a spiritual renewal, consolidating their faith in Jehovah and laying the foundation for post-exilic Judaism. With the rise of the Persian Empire and the decree of Cyrus the Great in 539 BCE, the Jews were finally freed and allowed to return to Jerusalem to rebuild their temple, marking a new chapter in their religious and political history. This fulfilled the prophecy of the 70 years of desolation, as recorded in the biblical book of Jeremiah. The Babylonian chronicles discovered on clay tablets confirm the invasion of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, as well as the deportation of the Jewish elite. The Bible narrates how the Jews were taken to Babylon, where they lived in exile for 70 years. The Babylonian tablets record these events, mentioning the kings of Judah and their deportations. One of the most important passages referring to the invasion of Jerusalem says the following: "In the 7th year of his reign, in the month of Kislev, the king of Babylon gathered his forces and marched toward Hattaland, Syria-Palestine, and besieged the city of Judah, Jerusalem. On the 2nd day of the month of Adar, he took the city and captured the king, Jeconiah. He appointed a king of his choice, Zedekiah, received a large tribute, and took the plunder to Babylon." This text details the end of the siege of Jerusalem in 597 BCE, 617 BCE according to biblical chronology, when Nebuchadnezzar deposed King Jeconiah and deported him along with the political and religious elite to Babylon. It also indicates how Zedekiah was imposed as a puppet king, marking Babylonian domination over Judah. Another important passage. In the 10th year of Nebuchadnezzar, in the month of Tammuz, the king of Babylon marched again westward toward Hattiland. This time, he besieged the city of Judah, Jerusalem, and then completely destroyed it. He burned the palaces and the temple of their god and deported the rest of the population. This second passage refers to the final destruction of Jerusalem in 607 BCE, according to biblical chronology, when Nebuchadnezzar returned after Zedekiah's rebellion. The burning of the palaces and the temple are events that are reflected in the Bible, where the complete devastation of Solomon's temple is described. The biblical account, written by the prophet Jeremiah, who was an eyewitness to the events that occurred over 2,600 years ago, aligns with the chronicles of King Nebuchadnezzar and adds more details. Below is an excerpt from them. And the Chaldeans broke into pieces the bronze pillars of the house of the Lord, along with the carts and the sea of bronze that were in the house of the Lord, and carried all the bronze to Babylon. They also took away the basins, the shovels, the extinguishers, the bowls, the cups, and all the bronze utensils used in the temple service. The chief of the guard took the basins, the fire pans, the bowls, the shovels, the lampstands, the cups, and the bowls that were of pure gold and silver. As for the 2 pillars, the sea, the 12 bronze bulls that were under the sea, and the carts which King Solomon had made for the house of the Lord, the bronze of all these articles was so much that it could not be weighed. The Babylonian exile is one of the most well-documented events in the Bible, and archaeology has provided a wealth of evidence that supports the biblical accounts of the destruction of Jerusalem and the captivity of the Jews in Babylon. Significant biblical information can be found in the books of Jeremiah, 2 Kings, Ezekiel, Daniel, Nehemiah, and Ezra. Conclusion: the Bible and archaeology. Throughout this documentary, we have explored how archaeological findings in Ur of the Chaldeans, Babylon, Assyria, and Jerusalem relate to the biblical accounts. Archaeologists face various difficulties when making ancient discoveries, ranging from site preservation to the accurate interpretation of the remains found. Some of the main difficulties include preservation conditions. Often, ancient materials have deteriorated due to environmental factors, such as humidity, temperature changes, and the passage of time. Organic materials like wood or textiles tend to disintegrate, leaving only fragments of ancient civilizations. Destruction and alteration of sites, human activities, both ancient and modern, such as urbanization, looting, or natural disasters, have destroyed or altered many archaeological sites before they could be properly studied. Lack of clear contexts. In many cases, objects are found outside their original context due to movements of earth, looting, or simply the passage of time. This makes it difficult to correctly interpret the function of artifacts or structures. Lack of written sources. In several ancient cultures, no written records were left, or they have been lost, forcing archaeologists to interpret history based solely on physical objects, which can lead to debates or uncertainty. Difficulty in dating. It is often difficult to determine the exact chronology of finds. Techniques like carbon-14 or dendrochronology help, but sometimes the remains cannot be dated precisely. You can find more information on dating methods on our channel, www.youtube.com/mankindroots. Many ancient inscriptions, especially those of conquering kings, were not only historical records, but also forms of political propaganda. These inscriptions aimed to glorify military victories and highlight the monarch's virtues, often exaggerating or distorting facts to present an image of invincibility and divine power. These difficulties highlight the complexity of interpreting the past, and although every discovery is significant, archaeologists must act with caution when reconstructing the history of ancient civilizations. The biblical accounts have stood the test of time and have proven to be reliable from a historical and geographical perspective. Sir Frederick Kenyon, one of the most prominent British archaeologists and paleographers, emphasized the value of the Bible as a crucial tool for archaeology. Kenyon stressed that archaeological discoveries often confirm the historical accounts mentioned in the scriptures, reinforcing their credibility. One of his most famous quotes on this subject is, "Archaeology has repeatedly confirmed the truthfulness of the biblical records." Discoveries have strengthened their authenticity and accuracy regarding the characters, places, and events mentioned in the Bible. The Bible, in addition to its spiritual value, is a fundamental historical source that allows us to trace the roots of humanity, offering a profound account of ancient civilizations, their cultures, conflicts, and the interactions that shaped much of our shared history. If you enjoyed this content and want to keep exploring more fascinating topics, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This way, you'll stay updated on upcoming videos